Story 1. I don't have millions of dollars to buy an existing farm, and I don't think I'd be particularly good at it. Story 2. Even with medical-grade sunscreen, I can only stay outside for about an hour. You could probably harm me with a strong light bulb. Story 3. My husband wants to be a subsistence farmer, hunter, and fisher, living on an acreage off the grid. He also wants our children to take music lessons, attend school, play sports, learn a language, and have money for activities like traveling. These dreams are incompatible unless we create some kind of passive income stream, as subsistence farming is more than a full-time job. Story 4. Currently, I can engage in various tasks that I excel at and that offer better rewards. It makes more sense for me to do this and support the people for whom this is a passion and livelihood with my salary by purchasing goods. Story 5. I work with many farmers in my job, and based on my observations, the only ones who make decent money are those born into large, generational farms. Most others trying to do it on their own only make enough to keep it going. Running a farm is expensive. Story 6. To become a small farmer, you need millions of dollars if you own farmland but do not own machinery. Story 7. Lack of institutional knowledge and resources passed down from my ancestors is how nearly all farmers learn to farm. Story 8. I'm a lifelong city boy and always have been. I'm not going to change at this point. If I don't see concrete every 50 feet, I get really uncomfortable. I'm allergic to nearly all plant pollen and animal dander. The quiet of rural areas makes my skin crawl. There are more reliable ways of making money. Story 9. Access to land, time, labor, and markets is essential. Part of me has always wanted to pursue agriculture. I grew vegetables in the house where I lived as an undergraduate, including tomatoes, cabbage, and herbs. I love farm-fresh products. I believe agriculture is a business that is especially well-suited for passing down through generations. Story 10. I played every Harvest Moon game. I've lived that life. There is an old abandoned farm I drive by on my way to work. I keep thinking about Harvest Moon. What if I could buy this property and start farming, running around the town, and randomly showing up at my neighbors' homes? Story 11. I do not own any land. Farm work is backbreaking labor, and there is a lot of it. It is not something I should be starting at the age of 47. Story 12. Bill Gates owns almost as much agricultural land in the United States as China. I don't think either of them would be willing to sell it to me at a low price. Additionally, I have very little knowledge of running a farm and certainly not enough money to invest or hire skilled workers. Story 13. The idea that one of the major purposes of civilization as a whole over the last 10,000 years was to elevate humanity beyond subsistence farming, allowing people to achieve more than mere survival. Story 14. If I recall correctly, farmers are underpaid, and the work is extremely laborious, which is sad because farmers play a crucial role in society. There are also many stressful challenges that farmers face. They must rotate crops, account for adverse weather patterns, determine which treatments or natural pesticides to use if they are organic, and manage losses in sales. Story 15. Not in my plans. I want to retire and start a bakery, focusing on the later stages of the farming process. Story 16. I grew up in the city, but I spent every summer from age 7 to 23 on various farms. First on relatives' mixed farms, then on cattle and sheep ranches. I paid my way through university by working summers at a government agricultural research station. I know exactly how much work it is, and I also understand that just when you start to get good at it, it's time to put away your cap. Story 17. I worked on a farm from ages 14 to 18. It was incredibly hard work as a child. I cannot imagine having to do it full-time now as someone over 50 years old. Story 18. It is too expensive. Land costs too much, labor costs too much, and government programs are being cut in my country. I have no idea if the crop insurance programs will be solvent in the coming years, which means one bad year could bankrupt me. There is no way to compete with large corporate farms or predict if there will be a drought or a flood. I have no desire to move back to rural America, where people may dislike me for my beliefs, and I do not want to need a gun for protection against local criminals who might attempt to steal my farm equipment. I could continue discussing this. My father used to farm, and my brother-in-law still struggles with farming. My father still owns several acres, but he just lets a neighbor bale it when the hay gets high enough. It is simply not worth the effort unless you are fully committed. Story 19. All the knowledge, land, and initial capital. Unless you are referring to being a picker, in which case, why would I want to break my back for unreasonably lower wages and overseers? Story 20. My biggest hurdle to becoming a farmer is my lack of desire to pursue farming. Story 21. My brother in Christ, that is a wonderful question. Honestly, I feel like I am too much of a coward. Farmers come from generations of experience, and I just wouldn't know where to start. Story 22. There is significant potential for profit in farming, but purchasing land is not as straightforward today. If my ancestors had acquired a few hundred acres in exchange for some coal, I would likely be thriving. Story 23. For large-scale farming, I have no interest in it. There is too much waste and too much suffering. For smaller farming and homesteading, it involves a lot of work. My best friends have a homestead, and I enjoy helping out on the farm, but it is not something I want to do every day. It is very tiring and comes with a lot of responsibility. Story 24. I don't enjoy physical labor, and farms are expensive. However, farming does interest me on a sustainability level. Being able to be self-sufficient in terms of food does hold great appeal. Story 25. I grew up on a small farm and come from a long line of farmers. I never farm unless I'm really hungry. Romanticizing farming is nonsense. Story 26. Honestly, I wouldn't even know where to start. The most I've grown is a tomato plant that died in a week. From what I can tell, it's not just about having a plot of land. You need serious equipment, knowledge, time, and money. Additionally, I feel like farming is backbreaking work, from sunrise to sunset, with no days off if you want to actually make a living. Even then, you're at the mercy of the weather, pests, and other unpredictable factors. Story 27. Space, experience, and a lack of masochism. A childhood on a farm was sufficient. I am done with the excrement of other creatures. Story 28. I would love to have my own little homestead. I might even like to build a greenhouse with an aquaponic setup. It would be small scale, but it is the same idea. Would you consider buying the land for me? Story 29. Everyone should have their own victory farm. I don't do it because I don't trust the air and soil pollution in my area. Additionally, I need to be confident in a long-term home so I can invest all my energy into a small-scale farm. Story 30. Farming requires dedication, and I respect those who choose it, but it is not for me. I prefer to avoid working in the sun and heat, as it can be challenging. Additionally, farming can be risky in times of drought or famine. Story 31. A $75,000 salary that doesn't require me to gamble on weather, equipment reliability, and a willingness to incur substantial debts to earn $44,000 to $47,000 is appealing. This hard work, underpaid, high risk, and thankless. Story 32. It's too late for me to start farming. Farming tends to be a younger person's profession. By the time I get started, I'll be the one being planted in the ground. Story 33. I am a lazy, overpaid work-from-home employee. Why would I do backbreaking work for very little pay? I have a garden and do some yard work, but being a farmer would need to pay significantly more to capture my interest. Story 34. I am rewarded much more by the market for doing what I do now. Why trade a comfortable living for a highly risky one? Story 35. Well, now that there is no cheap labor to pay under the table, it is plain unaffordable, isn't it? But that is disingenuous. I would not become a farmer even if I were rich enough to do so. Story 36. I ran a small farm in upstate New York. I stopped because the income was not good, and it required a significant amount of work for that pay. It is much easier to go back to school and earn money that way. If you do not already have access to family land, it is not inexpensive to get into farming. Story 37. I grew up on a severely abusive family farm. I am fortunate to have made it out alive. I have no desire to recreate even the slightest aspect of that experience. Story 38. I have a farm, but I am not a farmer. I wish I were, but if I become a farmer, I will no longer be able to afford the mortgage. My consulting job pays significantly more than any farming I could do on the land. I have to sell it for that reason. Story 39. I genuinely want to own a flower farm, but I love living in the city, and the land is incredibly expensive here. Story 40. I own no land, have no knowledge or skills related to farming, and I do not want to be a farmer. Story 41. I lost my farmer's license in 2015 due to unethical breeding and hybridization that resulted in what the United States Department of Agriculture described as the worst biological disaster since the Zuckerman disaster of 1968. It was a significant issue, but it was hushed up. To this day, I am not allowed to attend livestock auctions, even as a guest. Story 42. I already have back trouble, and Stardew Valley has ruined farming for me. I know that real farming won't be nearly as enjoyable. Story 43. The fact that I am an industrial worker living in an urban apartment without any farming knowledge or experience or the desire to change that. Story 44. The lack of land, equipment, knowledge of farming practices, sensible laws and regulatory requirements, and desire to be a farmer. Story 45. I have lived in several countries and traveled to many others, and I greatly prefer the city experience to the isolated rural experience. Story 46. Lack of interest. No one wants to rely on me for growing food or properly caring for farm animals. Story 47. I knew someone from my town who has her own farm now. With all the farm animals you can think of, she married a farmer and is now a farmer. Story 48. Starting a farm requires a significant amount of money to get started. I need funds for the land, to build barns, for animals and their food, for additional facilities to store equipment, and for tools and heavy machinery such as a tractor. There are many more expenses involved. Launching a real farm is not inexpensive. Additionally, I need ample time to accomplish all these tasks. Story 49. Well, in a loose sense, I am a farmer. In a fuller sense, I can't be a farmer due to the need to work and the fact that my farm would only produce at peak operational capacity, roughly $8,000 per year. If I had the capital to establish maximum perfection, maybe $10,000. If I focused intensely on related income streams, I might earn another $10,000. As my skills increased, I could potentially do a lot of related side work and earn up to $40,000 on top of that. So maybe $60,000, and it would take about 5 years of full-time effort to achieve this. Benefits and income are often the stopping points in the world. Story 50. Because land would cost $5.2 million, and there would be insurance on top of that, as well as fuel and maintenance costs. There is a significant amount of time, work, and money to be spent. Just one tractor with the attachments I need would cost over $250,000. Story 51. 1. Not wanting to be one. Location. Not owning land. Not being good with plants and animals. Story 52. I used to garden and it is very difficult. It was a fun hobby, but farming is quite challenging. Story 53. I have no land, no skills, no time, and no desire. I do have a plum tree and some grapevines, but my only interaction with them is to harvest the fruit and prune them when they become too large. If I wanted to spend millions of dollars on land and equipment, learn various challenging skills, work long hours each day, and barely make a living, I suppose I could do that. However, farmers are a unique group of people, and I am not one of them. Story 54. The cost of land and zoning in my area has changed significantly. It used to be all orchards and cattle pasture. Now it has million-dollar cottages. We used to grow apples and raise limousines, but there is no money in either anymore. Story 55. My body is not suited for physical labor, and I perform much better with a desk job involving numbers and complex mathematics. Story 56. If you are in the United States Department of Agriculture has beginning farm programs that will assist you from the start. This includes building a business plan, planning land purchases, low or no interest government loans, special grants for new farmers, and experienced help in learning the business. They also maintain leases and land purchase allotments for new farmers who qualify. If you meet the qualifications, they will appoint a beginning farmer coordinator to guide you through the processes and help you get set up. The biggest keys are: do you really want to put the effort into becoming a farmer? And are you willing to move to an area with land that qualifies under the programs? Story 57. To anyone who wants to become a farmer, good luck. I grew up on a family farm, one of the last generations, and many challenges stand in the way. Unless you are passionate about it, you will struggle without a significant amount of land or a solid business plan. Farming is no longer for the individual or family. It has shifted to corporate, large-scale operations, with farms of 1,000 acres or more. It is disheartening. This shift has also harmed rural America. Areas that once had hundreds of small farms are now owned by a single company that hires seasonal workers. This has devastated the local economy and continues to worsen over time. Unfortunately, many farmers supported political decisions that ultimately hurt them, particularly during trade disputes in the past. Story 58. No car and the other rule of adulthood in the country. If you don't already have a wife or girlfriend, you won't find one. So don't move out or graduate single. Story 59. I've always wanted to buy a big plot of land out west and grow corn. That's the dream: me, a dog, and acres of corn. Story 60. I grew up as a farmer. The work is challenging. It's hot, and it rains at inconvenient times. Everything fails and equipment breaks constantly. You work from dawn until the evening news because you have to check the weather. Then everything fails even worse than you expected. More things break, and more work is needed. You plow under a field that you just spent $40,000 on fertilizer for because it rained at the wrong time. Now, you need to drive to Winnipeg to meet with a buyer who isn't as interested as you thought. You find yourself crossing the border back at the Peace Gardens, and they search your car as if you were a drug smuggler. And all of that was on a Tuesday. Now you have Wednesday to deal with. Farming can be extremely difficult. If you have 6,000 acres of soybeans, that might not be so bad. You just need $2.5 million in equipment, and you may be able to net $10,000 a year. Gardening is not farming. Gardening is easier. Farming is a struggle. Story 61. Money. I wouldn't mind owning a hobby farm with a few chickens, horses, cows, and goats, but this all costs. I would need to be financially secure. Story 62. The fact is that it is frustrating. I do not want to spend millions of dollars on land and equipment just to work tirelessly in the sun all day for very little return. Story 63. I don't have a successful car reviewing show or a bank account to fall back on when life inevitably gets difficult. Story 64. Considering I just had a conversation with my dad earlier about starting a farm, nothing is stopping me now. We talked about possibly doing it someday. I opened Reddit and found this question. I'll take that as a sign to plant some fruits and vegetables. Story 65. Are we discussing large-scale agriculture or homesteading? Large-scale agriculture is too expensive. Any machine needed to get started will easily cost over $100,000 for just one. This includes a seeder, tractor, combine, headers, sprayers, and more. This does not take into account the cost of seed, chemicals, or land. In my area, people are selling out quickly to Hutterite colonies, making the chance of land being available for sale to a regular person virtually non-existent. Homesteading has been my personal goal, and the only obstacles I currently face are debt, insufficient savings, and the high price of land. Story 66. My uncle still lives there. I am not suited for physical labor. I enjoy gardening, but that's about it. Story 67. I am unable to afford to purchase or maintain a farm. I have no skills or knowledge on how to properly manage and maintain a farm. I am terrified of spiders and insects. Story 68. It would probably be easier to list what isn't the case. Setting aside the fact that I am not rich enough to buy land, not suited for country life, and not inclined to engage in physical labor, I can tell you that a lot goes into running a farm, much of which someone outside the agricultural industry wouldn't likely consider. I doubt the vast majority of people here have what it takes to farm. Story 69. I am not majoring in anything related to farming, nor do I wish to. I do not want to become a farmer, and farmers are often poor to the point of living below the poverty line. Story 70. I am a 42-year-old teacher who owns a small plot of land currently occupied by a townhouse governed by a homeowners association. I am fairly certain that commercial agriculture goes against the homeowners association rules. Story 71. My family owns several thousand acres of prime farmland in Iowa. I grew up near the farms, but I have over 20 cousins who were raised on these farms. None of them wants to farm now. They all attended college and earned degrees. The land is held in a trust that is valued at tens of millions, considering the current land prices. My mom is the trustee, and I should ask her more about it. Story 72. I suspect this is a bot, but if not, it is insulting to farmers when people think it is easy. As a farmer, I have money, experience, and time. Story 73. Do you know how expensive and demanding this work is? I sit behind a desk and design signs in the air conditioning. I laid tile as a child. It is backbreaking work, and skilled laborers are impressive. My grandfather built our family through hard work and dedication. It's challenging. Story 74. I have worked in an agricultural-related job and enjoyed it. However, farmland in this area costs $10,000 per acre. Additionally, there is machinery to purchase or lease, as well as seeds and fertilizers. If you choose to raise livestock, you also need to buy, care for, and feed them. Story 75. It is incredibly expensive, and the pay is so low that all the farmers I know are selling their farmland because they know they can set their kids up better with an investment portfolio. Story 76. Someday, we will use lawn trimmings and electrically powered cell reactions to grow large quantities of extremely cheap, delicious, nutritious, pesticide-free, and environmentally friendly food, making traditional farming look archaic and barbaric. Story 77. I grew up helping my grandparents on their farm, and I wonder why I would want that misery in my life when I can have a desk job. I mean, props to farmers. They are growing our food, and that is important, but I don't want to do that. Story 78. Money is important. I grew up on a farm and will inherit part of that farm at some point, but I'm not really interested in having two jobs to support myself and my family. I will probably just sell the land I inherit and invest it in my retirement plan. Story 79. Land. I don't own any, so I make the most of my humble backyard garden. I also enjoy living in the city. Growing up in a rural area, living by urban amenities is quite better for me. Story 80. I grew up on a farm and started doing chores when I was 4. 14 years of hard work that wasn't always rewarding. Currently, the area where I live struggles to grow crops. Story 81. If you are not already a farmer or do not own a farm, the startup costs for becoming a farmer are significant. Consider around $10,000 per acre for quality land, a couple of million for tractors, and remember, you will not have any income until your first harvest. Even then, if commodity prices are low, you risk losing money. Story 82. I'm struggling with a vegetable garden and feel unprepared to be a farmer. I also don't have the land or funds to get started. Story 83. Land value and climate change. My parents were farmers when I was young, but they sold the farm after they split. It's a considerable amount of work, and I don't think it's the most stable job in the long term these days, unfortunately. Story 84. I know a teacher of agriculture. She informs me that suicide rates are very high among farmers due to uncontrollable factors like the market and the weather. Story 85. Lack of desire, lack of ability, no startup funding, inability to afford a pay cut, dislike for the outdoors, aversion to taking care of farm animals, inconvenience and expense of repairing farm machinery due to the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, a hostile political landscape for farmers in America, and a desire to cherish my free time. Story 86. I do not own any farmland and do not have the money to buy one or fund the necessary machinery. I worked on farms in my 20s and somewhat miss it. However, my knees are in poor condition, so I am likely not a great candidate. Story 87. Land, money, my bad back, my increasing age, and the lack of desire to handle the process of selling it. along with the specialty knowledge required to support that kind of risk, weigh on my mind. I garden and grow plants, including edible ones indoors. I can manage a yard's worth of plants as long as they are not too finicky and I have help. I know the basics, such as how to trim for optimal growth, tackle powdery mildew and common pests, and choose the right fertilizers for different growth types. Honestly, if I were physically capable and had the financial means, I could see myself pursuing it. However, I recognize that it is a risky industry with significant manual labor involved unless you are willing to hire help. As operations scale up, the skill set required expands, including learning to operate heavier machinery. Even basic equipment like a tractor, plow, or auger requires more knowledge than backyard gardening. Story 88. Farming is not a livable occupation unless you have generational wealth and obtained land at a low cost decades ago. It often involves working extremely hard without adequate financial reward, leading to significant loan debt. Story 89. I love living in a city, but it can be hard to be a farmer here. I grew up on a farm. My parents went through so much hard work that I never want to experience. Story 90. Land prices, equipment prices, livestock prices, property taxes, and the motivation to wake up before sunrise and be productive are all common considerations. Story 91. Not much desire to do it. I mean, I would do it for fun, but they work hard. I am happy with my level of work and free time at the moment. Story 92. I have a hard enough time keeping a 20 by 20 foot vegetable garden alive. I don't want to be responsible for hundreds of acres. Story 93. It is extremely stressful, and unless you have a large operation, good luck making much money outside of a local farmer's market. That being said, visit your local farmer's market because many of them are doing it just for the satisfaction of it. I raise 10 to 20 cattle a year depending on my goals, and without grants, I am barely making a profit. If one of them gets seriously ill, I have to take that loss. However, I really enjoy the process. It gives me a great sense of accomplishment when people tell me how fantastic their beef is and when they ask me to raise another cow just for their family. If I fully committed to this, applied for every grant available, and obtained insurance, I am sure I could make it work, but it is too risky with a wife and child. Story 94. I tried. It's very difficult, especially with a neurodivergent brain, to navigate through layers of regulation. There are classes and guidance available, but it is also general and leads in circles that I could not make sense of how any of it applies to me. The costs are prohibitive. Without a significant influx of capital, I could not acquire the skills and equipment needed to make it work. Any profit margin is so small that there was no way to make it pay for itself in the time I had. Farmers markets in our area have become very corporate and competitive. Costs are high, and expectations are even higher. I couldn't commit to every single weekend, nor could I make enough to cover the cost of the booths that I had to commit to. Story 95. Having a homestead is my dream, but other more important things in life are incompatible with that, and I'm honestly not sure I would be any good at it anyway. Farming in this economy? Story 96. We are in trouble. Nobody wants to farm, and how will we survive without food? Consider everything you enjoy. Think about the raw materials used to make those items. It will likely lead you back to something that was grown on land, even ultra-processed products or non-edible items. Farming needs better public relations and improved insurance, or else we will end up with engineers creating alternatives while we miss out on real food. Story 97. How much would you estimate the cost of starting a farm from scratch on a scale that allows you to live off it? Assuming you need to purchase everything from land to machinery. Story 98. I would dislike being a farmer. I know I'm not suited for that, nor do I have any desire to be suited for it. I have great respect for all farmers. It must be tough work. Story 99. A complete lack of interest in farming, along with a total lack of knowledge of farming techniques, is a significant obstacle for me. Story 100. It is difficult to find someone to house and cat sit for me when I travel. I cannot imagine trying to find someone to help with farm animals. Story 101. Lack of money in my area means you would likely need $10 million to afford enough land to establish a viable farming operation. Most people entering farming today are the sons or daughters of current farmers. Story 102, Jesus Christ. I don't like being outdoors and I don't like animals. I don't want to have to harm them. I can't keep a plant alive. And I am black. Enough of my ancestors were farmers as it was. It's not for me. Story 103, don't give up. I am 68 and about to complete the deal to buy a farm. I worked in construction all my life but realized about 20 years ago it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. I retired 2 years ago and am finally able to live my dream. I am buying just over 1,000 acres with a good contractor in place to help me. I doubt I will ever make money, but I will die a happy man. Story 104. I haven't been transported to another world yet with some sort of unrealistic cheat skill to make me the ultimate god of farming. But for real, it's very hard work. It's both physically demanding and time-intensive. I'm not suited for that, and I don't enjoy digging in the dirt. In short, it's a thankless job done by people who love their land, and we should be much more grateful and appreciative of their efforts. Story 105. I recently looked into it, but the cost of land and equipment makes it nearly impossible unless you were born into it. I considered starting with equipment that is over 25 years old, but I couldn't make the numbers work to justify the risk. Now, I'm really glad I didn't just go for it like some people advised me to. Are you talking about actual farming or creating a little homestead? Some of the other replies have me thinking it is the latter. Story 106. My grandparents were farmers, and from what I remember, they had to get up early to feed and milk the cows. They never went on holiday. Story 107. I work with farmers, and the things that people don't realize about farming are, every piece of equipment costs around $500,000, and most of it is only used for 3 weeks. You also need to know how to operate and repair this equipment yourself. The driver's seat resembles an airplane cockpit, and the exterior is covered in dirt, rust, grease, and possibly prickly plant material or animal droppings. Your crops, animals, land, and the pests trying to consume your crops or animals show no concern if you are sick, tired, or on vacation. You do not get a day off. You don't work until 4 p.m. You work until the job is done, which is never. Everyone thinks that any liquid you have is some form of chemical poison directed at them personally. If you're a farmer, you live in a rural area. Everyone around you is related to you, and by around, I mean within 50 miles. You might consider your neighbors to be neighbors, but they are so far away you can't even see them. Farming involves perishables. Meat, animals, and crops, all at risk of becoming spoiled at any time. As a crop farmer, you buy expensive seeds, put them in the soil, and hope that the seed seller didn't deceive you. Nature won't intervene negatively, and that everything will work out. You invest all your money in the soil and hope for a successful return. Story 108. Watching Clarkson's farm is quite entertaining. He gets into fun situations and does a lot of good, but it's a challenging profession. Story 109. The only tomatoes I ever managed to grow were the ones that sprouted accidentally from the compost heap. Story 110. I can't grow plants well and dislike weeding, which I still have to do even after putting down a cardboard layer. Story 111. I grew up in a rural farming community, and while it has its advantages, I have seen how backbreaking it can be. I understand how much you are tied to cultivating your land and how difficult it is to break free for travel and family. No, thank you. Story 112. I have too many onions tied to my belt. It is difficult to get around, and I cannot even bend over anymore. Story 113. I do not want to be a farmer. It involves a lot of hard manual labor for unpredictable returns. The government is increasingly hostile to the agriculture industry. Every time I turn around, there is another headline that negatively affects American farmers. So no, thank you. Story 114. I won't inherit a farm large enough for commercial farming, and I am not rich enough to buy one. The market for smaller operations is insufficient to make a living unless you operate a hobby farm or petting zoo. Story 115. I don't have millions of dollars to buy land. I have no idea how to farm. Every news article makes farming sound like a difficult job right now. Story 116. There is no money in it as far as I can tell. I am a software developer, though, so considering the transition from staff engineer to goose farmer, maybe that is where I will ultimately end up anyway. Story 117. Because the barrier to entry is substantial. Sure, John Deere will let you purchase a lot of the larger equipment with loans, but unless you contract everything out, there is a significant amount of equipment to acquire. Then there is land, which is extremely expensive. Renting farmland is the only viable option for most, but you still have to find enough to make it worthwhile. Additionally, there are fuel costs, insurance, labor, fertilizer, pesticides, and water. Even with all of that, you may still have a poor year, and your crop may not yield much. It's advisable to hope that government subsidies remain available. Many farmers are constantly searching for side jobs to afford their living expenses. Story 118. Land is incredibly expensive in this economy. I should have invested in land earlier. Story 119. Millions of dollars. Ambition to be a farmer. My mother's side of the family consists entirely of farmers. I have a friend who is a farmer, and my father and grandfather used to farm. It is not easy work and takes up most of every day. Story 120. I wouldn't enjoy that. I prefer working with information and creating something from it, rather than doing hard manual labor in hot summer weather. Story 121. Have you ever been on a farm? It is difficult work with very long hours, and you are at the mercy of nature. Not enough rain, too much rain, pests, and disease. Oh, you had a successful year. Sorry, so did everyone else, and now prices are crashing down. My father was an agriculture teacher, and I spent a lot of time on farms. Farming does not pay well. If you have a way to consistently receive government subsidies, that is great, and you may make a good profit. But actual farming to produce food to sell is hard work with low margins. Story 122. I have seen how much they have to endure, and I am not interested at all. Additionally, I am disabled. I could not become one even if I wanted to. I also dislike cows. I strongly dislike cows. I enjoy hamburgers, steak, and all the products that come from cows. However, I have negative feelings towards the animals themselves. It stems from childhood experiences involving a stubborn cow and a broken foot. Story 123. Is this real? Good luck trying to get into the game even if you wanted to. Ownership of tillable land is consolidating among the largest multi-generational farming families and wealthy individuals because they are the only ones who can afford it. If they do not buy the land, it will be developed. You would need enough money to start 2 or 3 breweries to achieve the volume required. What's that? A drought? Game over. Story 124. I don't know why, but this question makes me laugh. Here are some other questions you can ask. What is currently stopping you from becoming a coal miner? What is currently stopping you from being a beekeeper? Story 125. No money to purchase property and no experience in farming, unless you count hours of playing Stardew Valley. Story 126. My wife does not want to move to Australia. I found some beautiful properties with mango groves and instant access. Story 127. I dislike bugs, the sun, and heat. I am also uncomfortable with being directly responsible for my income. When crops fail, what happens next? I find myself in debt because I cannot pay my bills, and then my tractor breaks down. Now I have to plow the fields myself because I cannot afford the high cost of having John Deere come out to fix it. For some reason, I do not have the right to repair my equipment, unlike McDonald's. Consequently, I am experiencing a breakdown in an unplowed, barren field, struggling to use the ox plow I have, despite never having owned oxen. Story 128. It is frustrating and can make you feel incompetent. Can you fix a 40-year-old tractor carburetor? Yes, absolutely. Are you able to vote without making foolish mistakes? No, unfortunately not. Story 129. I dislike mornings, getting dirty, and I am not a fan of cleaning up after animals. I cannot identify any aspect of my personality or desires that would make me suitable to be a farmer. Story 130. I have no idea what I would be doing, how much the initial startup costs would be, or if it would even be feasible where I live. Story 131. I considered investing every dollar I had into a 60-hour-per-week job that would earn me $30,000 in a good year and lead to bankruptcy in most years, but then I stopped criticizing myself. Story 132. There is a significant increase in solar energy development in our area. This used to be a large dairy farming region, but many of the smaller farms have closed due to lack of profitability, hard work, and no days off. The families still own their land, but the tax burden is challenging. When meetings about solar energy occur, people attend and express their desire for the land to remain dedicated to farming. I was impressed when a former farmer calmly asked the attendees if any of them planned to start a farm. He spoke about the land being in his family for generations, explaining that leasing some to solar energy developers allowed them to retain ownership. He questioned who they thought would farm the land if none of them intended to do so. Story 133. Bill Gates bought all the farmland. Story 134. As someone who grew up ranching, I had to make something of myself and choose my own path. I chased a girl and ended up as an electrician. What's stopping me is that I don't want to go back with my tail between my legs, even though I know I prefer that lifestyle. You can build whatever you want, work on equipment whenever you want, park your truck wherever, and you don't have to deal with traffic. It's hard work. Equipment breaks, and you sometimes work until midnight, then you're back in the fields by 4. It's tough bailing in the heat, and it just doesn't feel right. I miss it the same way I miss climbing towers. Simple work, and you're fully in control. Anything that goes wrong is probably your fault, and you're the only person who can fix it since the nearest parts store is at least an hour away. Likely 2. Story 135. My garden is not big enough, and I would not have the slightest idea what to do. Additionally, farmers earn very little for a lot of hard work. No, thank you. Story 136. My parents are farmers, but our country's government has made it impossible to make a sustainable living from farming unless it is on a huge scale larger than I could achieve. Story 137. My chronic pain makes it difficult, but I would love to be a farmer and work outside with my hands all day. I want to care for the animals, tend the garden, clean the stalls, and change the water, enjoying all the lovely things that a farm entails. Story 138. Common sense. I grow a lot of food as it is. Farming doesn't seem like a good industry for my lifestyle preferences. Story 139. Growing up around farmers, I work 40 hours a week, which is less than before. My cousin was a farmer for 40 years, and he often says that selling the farm and getting a regular job was the best decision he ever made. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.